Hey everybody, Joe Joseph here, and this is the Sheeple.com's Daily News Brief. Let's get started with the SHTFplan.com. They had a great piece today that really kind of shows the delicate nature of the economy. And when I say that, I mean sometimes it's not the United States as a whole. Sometimes you have to actually look at states individually, because some states are a little more healthy than others, especially in with regards to economics, quality of life, cost of living, etc. Well, SHTFplan.com has an article, Are You Living in a Death Spiral? These 6 states will collapse during the next recession. Now, you can take a look at certain things. We know that the Fed is due to do a rate hike here in December. When that happens, you're going to have natural things that happen when the Fed raises rates. I want to get into this article a little bit because I think that the people that reside in these states are going to see some reduction in benefits, especially if you rely on any sort of social services. You're going to have problems there. There are also cities, of course, that are in very, very bad economic health. It says being on the hook is not going to be pretty when interest rates are raised back up and debts come due. At a personal level, it'll mean more stress and juggling to meet or make ends meet. For the larger economy, it means cities and states will be unable to meet their obligations or balance their budgets, ending in bankruptcy and bailouts. Meanwhile, millions of people are relying on that money to keep things coming and keep going just to survive. Relying upon government to function and send you money is not a secure plan. If you take a look, folks, for a second at Social Security and the way it is right now, it's insolvent. Look at the unfunded liabilities of the federal government. It's crazy. On a state government or in the state's perspective, they're not that much better off. It says in the next phase of the financial crisis, the debt supercycle will become the most defining feature of the big hurt that will fall on nearly everyone. That's the dire warning that Goldman Sachs issued about what they termed the third wave of the global collapse. But it hasn't come yet, at least not yet. This is what they said. This wave is characterized by rock bottom commodity prices, stalling growth in China, and other emerging market economies, and low global inflation. This triple whammy has its roots in the response to the first 2 waves of crisis, the banking collapse and European sovereign debt crisis, and it's all part of the so-called debt supercycle of the past few decades. Of course, we know that debt levels are at never before seen levels in modern history. You've had the Greek debt crisis that transpired. And now you have Italy, which I believe is the second or third largest economy in the EU, that's facing some unbelievable economic stress as a result of their big banks requiring bailouts and because they have a social welfare state. That's the way that they've been set up for quite a while. And you can't have that many people drawing on a system with a limited number of people paying into it. It just doesn't work. Forbes contributor William Baldwin describes the acute problem of the death spiral states, which could actually be as bad as it sounds. Listen to this. It says, does your state have more takers than makers? Check this out. California has a powerful economy with 14 million private sector jobs, but it also has burdens. Welfare recipients measure 12.6 million people. Generously paid government employees, 2.1 million people. And people collecting pensions from the government, 1.3 million people. Add those numbers up, and there are 114 clients drawing from the government for every 100 people chipping in by working outside the government and paying taxes. So he says, we're calling this the feed me ratio. 6 states have a number over 100. These states are at risk of going into a downward spiral in the next recession. The burdens will remain, but too many of the providers, employers in the private sector, might shrink or even decamp. So here are your 6 biggest states dealing with this, according to Baldwin. New Mexico has 148 dependents per private sector worker. West Virginia, 116 dependents per private sector worker. California, 114 dependents per private sector worker. Mississippi, 111 dependents per private sector worker. New York has 108 dependents per private sector worker, and Arkansas, 103. So those are your major states right now that face a big economic catastrophe should we head into another recession where you see interest rates rise and there become a debt crunch. Now, on a municipal level, cities like Baltimore, Detroit, and Chicago, they're not going to be able to make it. So the question is now, what happens? What happens is you're going to have cities and states go into what's called receivership. And when that happens, every teacher contract gets voided. Every first responder contract gets voided. And you basically start off at square one. And you're doing, and think about this too, all the retirements, everybody that depends on pensions from a state or municipal government, instantly gone, out, see you later. Ask the people of Detroit what happened when all of a sudden their pensions weren't available to them. Look at what's going on right now down in Dallas, how they had to suspend people from pulling money out of their retirement accounts in Dallas because too many people were drawing on it, and it was basically a bank run on their retirement. So they had to stop it. This just goes to show you how fake our economy actually is. And it doesn't stop there. Even one of the biggest things they say as far as stirring up the waters for a financial crisis is commodity prices. When you have a commodities crash, like oil, for example, it tends to upset the entire marketplace. And ZeroHedge.com today just wrote how oil's tumbling big time after a big surprise crude build and gasoline build. Listen to this. After 2 weeks of huge builds at Cushing, the most since 2008, expectations were for a third big weekly build at Cushing and draw in overall crude. Oil prices knee-jerk lower as API reports a major build in overall crude inventories. Listen to this. They expected a 1.5 million barrel draw, and instead they saw a 4.68 million barrel build. This was the largest build in 11 months. And this, meanwhile, while you have Saudi Arabia, OPEC nations getting together, coming to some sort of conclusion that they're going to cut production, even though I've said in the past, if you look at the cut, it's minuscule. It's only meant to sate or make these players and speculators on Wall Street feel better. But it doesn't matter, because if they draw down, guess who takes their place in the marketplace? The shale producers of the United States. Because you have to remember, when oil prices went down, they started shuttering their operations in North Dakota and down south. And of course, that caused major economic instability here, because you had states and municipalities that were banking on these oil revenues, and then all of a sudden the market and the prices fall out from underneath them, and they were stuck with big deficits. Well, guess who would love to be able to fill in any sort of production holes? And they will do it, because the cost of shale and extracting shale, no matter how environmentally unfriendly it is, that cost is coming down fast. And it's becoming profitable at a much lower cost per barrel. So you're going to see the United States, especially with a Trump administration, come in and try to push OPEC out of the way, which, if you're going to stay with oil, then the United States would be wise to use its own assets, vice drawing in stuff from overseas, become self-sufficient. I think it's smart personally that we move away from oil only because of the turmoil that it produces and the environmental factors involved in extracting this stuff when we have technology available to us that, basically people could have free energy if we really wanted to get down to it. I mean, these things happen. So with a new president, you can expect that there's going to be turmoil because they're not going to let Trump just waltz in and take over and everything's going to be love, peace, and harmony. No. There are going to be things that are going to spark turmoil in many different ways. The Daily Sheeple did a great piece today, 5 factors that could transform civil unrest into a full-blown revolution. They mirrored Ready Nutrition's article today by Jeremiah Johnson. And this is a continuing series that he's doing. And he basically let these five factors out. And he says the U.S. is on the cusp, he says, of what could be a major revolution. He says the potential for revolution exists in all countries at any given time. He says we'll first list some of the factors that cause an uprising to transform into an all-encompassing revolution. Of course, the first factor that he goes over is the one that I just talked about, economic. And an economic collapse can happen in many different ways. Of course, you could have runaway inflation. Look at what's going on down in Venezuela. You can devalue the nation's currency, or you can have chronic or acute unemployment, which I don't know if we'll see right away because President Trump looks to, at least in the short run here, is looking to shore up manufacturing and perhaps bring some manufacturing jobs back. See, we shifted from being a producing nation to providing services, and our production capability has been decimated. So it's going to take some time to get back there. The second form of revolution would be warfare. He says warfare can lead a country to a country's dissolution either by insurgency or occupation, followed by an attempt to resist either against a foreign oppressor or a country that has, in a manner of the Hessians in the Revolutionary War, invited in an occupying army. Or perhaps it could be our own army that operates against us, that could perhaps stir civil unrest, that could spark revolution. The Sheeple also posted a article today talking about a plane, a C-130 that was flying and doing these weird patterns over Manhattan. You have to understand that over Manhattan is that's a no-fly zone. So to have military aircraft flying over Manhattan is highly unusual. And of course, when questions were asked by the media and by other organizations, everybody didn't know what was going on. The Air Force didn't know what was going on. Then the FAA was asked, and they can't divulge information. You have to ask the Air Force, and they just send you in circles and circles and circles. And you also had Black Hawk helicopters that were also operating in Manhattan. So this appeared to be something similar to operations that we saw over other major cities, like perhaps Minneapolis. We saw it in Dallas and Austin. We saw it in Miami. We've seen it over Hartford. We've seen it in St. Louis, where we have active duty military drilling in our major cities. And they'll say, oh, well, it's to, prepare for overseas, urban warfare overseas. Since when do overseas cities in anywhere that we're operating, which is typically the Middle East and or AFRICOM, how do those cities look like our cities? How can you compare our cities to those cities? You can't. They're different in every way possible. The only conclusion you can come to is they're drilling to be prepared in the event that they need to use the military here in the United States. But, on this factor, we also have thousands upon thousands of foreign troops that are already here, whether it be going to the, say, Armed Forces Staff College. You have NATO has a headquarters over here. You have thousands of foreign troops always training with our troops over here in the United States. So yeah, you very well could have some sort of occupying army here. And remember, too, folks, that you wouldn't necessarily want our active duty military doing anything here because of hesitation. They might hesitate in doing what they're supposed to do because it may tug at their purse string, at their heartstrings. But would it tug at a foreign occupier? Probably not. The third way is religious or theological. He says in this form, either of persecution of a culture's predominant religion or factions or schisms leading to confrontations of conflict between two religious groups. Here in the United States, we have, and the world for that matter, you have two major religious groups that are butting heads with each other. You have Christianity and you have Muslims and Islam, right? And you can see that it's being cultivated. It's being nurtured by narratives and pushed by propaganda. And we can't fall for it. You know, at the root of each of these religions is love. So if all we did was embrace what our religions say that we should embrace, no one should have a problem. You know, Jesus taught to love your neighbor. Doesn't matter if your neighbor was pagan. How did he treat other pagans when he walked the face of the earth? Did he spit on them? Did he hate them? No. Love your neighbor. It's that simple. When you do that, people can believe what they want to believe. We respect each other's differences, and we carry on smartly. The fourth, government oppression. He says government oppression in the form of excessive taxation. Taxation with either no representation, as when an executive branch secures a ruling outside of actual legislative bodies or processes, or misrepresentation, a tax is declared for one thing and ends up being sequestered for another. Other forms of oppressive acts from a legitimate established government include, of course, martial law or unlimited police power in the hands of the state. We see the police state here all the time. Look at the 1033 program and what that's done, militarizing our police here in the United States. If you don't know what the 1033 program is, Google it. Look it up. It's unbelievable. Let's give our police departments free military equipment for them to use against us. It used to be that they served the people, that they were part of the community. Now they consider us civilians. Do you understand that the mindset has totally changed? Unbelievable. Finally, the last thing is civil unrest. He says civil unrest due to any of the above factors with the added problem of cultural or racial strife in the citizenry with revolution as recourse, when the people suffer from the genuine or perceived blight of believing or knowing there is no legislative or demonstrative recourse in a peaceful vein. It can also parallel economic factors when the abolition of the middle class occurs with a great disparity of wealth between the rich and the poor. Of course, we've seen that here in the past decade or so with the repeal of Glass-Steagall in the United States. You've had the banking merge with investments, and you've had the middle class basically evaporate before our eyes with a huge chasm between the lower class and the upper class. You have a lot of the wealth concentrated in the upper 0.01%. You know, and that's what it is. It's just, we're just giving them our money. It's crazy. And they'll take it. But pretty soon, there's not going to be anything left to take. What are they going to take? Can't squeeze blood from a stone. I mean, these are the factors that we face, any one of which, of course, could transform into a full-blown revolution. That's why it's so important, of course, that we prepare ourselves for any sort of eventuality, you know, because these are very perilous times. And don't be enamored by the hope and change of Trump. Okay, at the end of the day, you don't become $9 billion rich by caring about your average Joe. That just doesn't happen. Folks, let's be vigilant. Let's provide accountability. And I will be back tomorrow with another daily news brief brought to you by thedailysheeple.com. Subscribe to our newsletter over at thedailysheeple.com and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And I'll see you tomorrow. God bless everybody.